I want to take just a moment to share with you a thought that we had yesterday in our Zoom class. Looking at Psalms 145, David writes, he says, I will exalt you, my God the King. I will praise your name forever. Every day I will praise you and extol your name forever and ever. For great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. His greatness no one can fathom. I know that you are a believer. I know that you see the fingerprints of God, but I wonder in times like this, certain times in your life, do you find yourself a little bit worn down, a little bit exhausted? I remember when we lived out in California, I'd take my boys on the last day of school. They'd finish up school, they'd come home, we'd pack up the car, and I'd take them to Yosemite National Park, and we'd go camping for a couple of days together. Leave Kara at home just to be a girl, and I'd take the boys, and we would go and be boys. And while we were out there, we would take a long hike, several miles up into the mountains, to the top of a waterfall or up on top of a mountain ridge. And I remember over each year watching this happen over and over again. My boys would be excited as we headed down the trail. As we started up the mountain, they would be kicking the pine cones, chasing the squirrels, going and looking for a walking stick or a lightsaber stick or something. They were just having fun as we walked up the mountain. As the day went on, their energy sort of waned. We got to the top, we would have lunch together, pull out a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, have a water bottle, and re-energize. And we'd start making our way back down the mountain. And as we would come down the mountain, we would forget about a couple of those places where we were going down, but in order to get back to the car or back to our tent, you'd have to go back up the hill a bit. And we were worn out, we were exhausted. And I remember watching as their attitude, their conversation just drained, just waned, just stopped. And I remember if I were to engage them in some conversation about their highlights, their interests, their personal energy would come back alive. They would get excited again. And I remember over the course of my years watching a variety of us take hikes, adults, young men, women. And when we're tired, our voices start to become quiet. We start to become introspective. We feel the pain a little bit more, and we're taught to hold that in to ourselves. But if you can get talking, if you can get them excited about their dreams and their thoughts and their hopes and their wishes, their energy starts to come back alive and we start to pick up the pace. The same thing happens as you watch those geese migrate year after year. They're in that V formation and you hear them honking at one another, encouraging one another as they continue on mile after mile, year after year, making that pilgrimage. I want to ask you, are you becoming worn down in your relationship with God? Do you find yourself becoming quieter and quieter about the greatness of God? David says, again in Psalms, he says, all your works praise you, Lord. Your faithful people extol you. They tell of the glory of your kingdom and they speak of your might, so that all people will know your mighty acts and your glorious splendor of your kingdom. Is that true of us right now? Are we speaking about the greatness of God? Are we bringing praise to our lips? I want to challenge you today, in the midst of the rain, in the midst of the middle of this week, in the midst of all that you've got going on, can you find one thing to praise God for? Can you find one thing to speak his name, his greatness out loud, and let your ears hear that message? I want to encourage you today to speak God's name so that you hear it, so that your heart is enriched. Your mind is excited about God. Your priorities are shifting as you listen to this great message that's already in your heart. Speak it to yourself. David goes one step further and he talks about how the world is proclaiming God's greatness. He says in verse 21, my mouth will speak of the praise of God. Let every creature praise his holy name forever and ever. As you walk out into nature, as you watch a sunrise, as you look at the stars, as you see the trees and the flowers that are in bloom, will you give praise to God? Will you listen and see the nature that is praising God? Can you even find an opportunity to praise God in front of others? Let your witness of his great power be proclaimed in your words, both to your heart and to those around you. Today, as you go forth, may we see God at work. May we see God as great, and may we speak what we see. Have a great day.
Lord, take my